So I work for the Center for Ecoliteracy, which from the title you can tell would only happen in Berkeley, California. The center is dedicated to education for sustainable living. It was founded about 13 years ago by Fritjof Capra, who is a well-known physicist, a systems thinker, and an author. Those of you, and I'll kind of age myself here, who went to college like in the 70s and read the Tao of Physics, well, that was by Fritjof. We all freaked out. It was so cool. Anyway, he's written about 8 books since then, and the latest is The Science of Leonardo, and it's about Leonardo da Vinci, and it's just incredible. Our work is dedicated to sustainable living, which requires that citizens understand and be able to live upon and act upon the social, ecological, and economic dimensions in such a way that they're mutually enhancing. Now, that sounds pretty abstract, but it really boils down to how we get the things we need, how we provision ourselves, where do we get our food, our water, our materials, our health, our livelihood, and so on. So that's really what our work is dedicated to. We work with K-12 schools all over. We've worked with schools in 200 cities across 6 continents that represent 4 million students. Although most of our work does tend to be in California, we do work with agencies and schools outside of California. We're recently writing a book on schooling for sustainability that showcases schools from all over the country that are models of sustainable living. In fact, I was visiting one school yesterday while I was up here. So 12 years ago, we started 13 years ago, our first on-the-ground project was here at this famous garden at the Edible Schoolyard at Martin Luther King Jr. High in Berkeley. And we teamed up with Berkeley Unified School District, Martin Luther King Jr. High staff, and the Chez Panisse Foundation to start a program that was meant to be systemic in nature, in that we'd look at the garden, the cooking project, the dining commons or the cafeteria, and the academic part of that. So that was really our start, was there at King. And since then, we've branched all over the place. But what we always do is look at it systemically. What about the whole school? And then we zero in on the curriculum. Our goal is really to amp up the academic learning that happens in all those venues, the garden, the school, the kitchen, the cafeteria, and the classroom. Because after all, schools are for learning. And so our goal is really to take a look at how we can deepen kids' understanding concepts related to all those venues. So we've created very recently a document that you all have called Big Ideas. And it's sold through Acorn Naturalist, and the flyer for that is outside, but we love Michelle. So we decided that we would provide it for you complimentary. We're very fond of the work you're doing too. So anyway, you have a complimentary copy of that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that idea. But you know, ironically, the curriculum is often the last thing to change. Even at the Edible Schoolyard, you know, Alice waltzed in, wanted this school to look prettier because it really was a hideous school. It was just like your typical urban blight school. And she got them to put in the garden. And then they started looking at their school food, and with Chef Ann Cooper coming on board, that's improved a lot. And then they built the kitchen classroom. So the garden offered this still offers this wonderful pull-out program. Kids come once a week, great lessons. The kitchen offers this wonderful program. Kids come once a week, great lessons. But only until recently are we really seeing changes in the classroom learning. That those teachers are now, instead of having a break while their kids go to the garden and the kitchen, integrating the garden and the cooking into their academic learning. And I'll give you some examples of that. Just a little bit about what Big Ideas is. It's meant to be exactly that. It's chock full of big ideas, the main concepts, for you to think about, or for teachers to think about, as they're trying to teach kids about food, culture, health, and the environment. It's for grades K through 12. There's a K2 section, a 3-5 section, a 6-8 section, and a 9-12 section. And it's based on the benchmarks from AAAS, which is the American Association for the Advancement of Science. So it's blessed for your teachers to be teaching that. Most of their standards in science are based on AAAS, and the wonderful thing about the benchmarks is that they're interdisciplinary. So even though they're from the top science education organization, they're remarkably interdisciplinary, and that's why we chose it as our guiding document. So the food section really looks at helping kids understand the enjoyment of food and eating and the role that food and food systems play in our everyday lives, that it builds conceptually and sophistication from K through 9, and it looks at where our food comes from and the impact of our food choices on the society and on the environment. The culture section at each grade level considers how we prepare and eat food, what food we eat, when we eat it, and kids gain an understanding that that's all influenced by culture, by society customs, and by economics. The health section looks at each grade level, it looks at diet and diet-related behaviors and how what we eat affects our health, both individually and societally. And by critically examining influences on our diet, kids strengthen their understanding of the kinds of food choices they make and what the implications for that are. And finally, the environment section looks at ways that our food system is dependent on other organisms in the food web. Even as our food-producing technologies get further and further away from nature, it's still the source. It also looks at scientific aspects of food of all living things, so not just food requirements for humans, but for all living things, and the environmental impacts of our eating habits and the way we treat the eating habits of other organisms on the environment. So each section starts with a big idea, and we invented these big ideas. We thought, what are the core ideas, concepts that we think every single citizen in this country should understand? And that's what those big ideas are. And then we went to the level of what we call essential questions. What are the provocative questions that we want educators to engage in as they develop lessons, learning activities, projects, research, whatever with students? What are those essential questions that we want them to be asking about the content that they're going to teach?